Dad, we've already signed the papers. The farm is sold. You have until Friday to get your things out. My son hung up before I could say a single word. He thought that was the end of it. He thought 73 years of my life could be boxed up and hauled to the curb by Friday afternoon. He thought the land my grandfather broke his back clearing. The land where I buried my wife 6 years ago under the old white oak at the edge of the south field was just an asset on a balance sheet that needed to be liquidated. What my son didn't know was that he had just made the most expensive mistake of his life, and I was going to let him figure that out all by himself. My name is Arthur Whitmore. I spent 35 years as a civil engineer before I retired to the family farm in Harlan County, Kentucky. Before I softened, before I became the old man in overalls who grew tomatoes and fed the barn cats every morning, people in the industry used to call me ironclad, not because I was mean. Because when I signed a contract, every single word in it meant exactly what it said, nothing more, nothing less. My son and his wife had forgotten that. They forgot who I was before I became their convenient problem to solve. It started the way these things always start, quietly and with excuses that sounded almost reasonable. My son called me on a Tuesday morning in early March. I was sitting on the back porch drinking coffee, watching the fog lift off the creek bottom the way it does every spring. It's the kind of morning that makes you feel grateful to be alive. It was the last morning I would feel that way for a while. Dad, he said, his voice carrying that practiced casualness that I had learned to distrust, I need to talk to you about something. Melanie and I have been thinking, the farm is a lot for one person to manage. You're not getting any younger. The property taxes alone are killing you. We've had an offer from an ag company out of Lexington. Serious money, Dad. Real money. We think you should consider it. I told him I'd think about it. That was my mistake. With some people, thinking about it is the same as saying yes. 3 weeks later, he called back. His voice was different that time. Flatter. More efficient. The way people talk when they've already decided something and are just informing you of it. That's when he told me the papers were signed, that the sale had closed, that I had until Friday. I put my coffee cup down on the porch railing very carefully. My hands were steady. They've always been steady, even under pressure. Especially under pressure. I asked him one question. I asked him which parcel he had sold. He said, all of it, Dad. The whole 412 acres. Stop making this complicated. Then the line went dead. I sat there for a long time listening to the birds. A mockingbird was going through its repertoire in the hackberry tree by the fence. I thought about my wife, Ellen. I thought about the morning we drove up the gravel road for the first time after we bought out my uncle's share of the property. Her laughing at something on the radio, her hand resting on my knee. I thought about what she would say right now if she were sitting in the other chair. She would say, Arthur, you taught him everything about construction. Did you ever teach him how to read a deed? I almost smiled. I got up, went inside, and made a phone call to a woman named Vera Cushman. Vera is 71 years old, semi-retired, and she is the sharpest real estate attorney I have ever met in 40 years of dealing with contracts. I've sent her Christmas cards every year since 1987. She answered on the second ring. Vera, I said, I need you to pull a file. It's been in my safe deposit box at First National for about 12 years. You'll know it when you see it. It's the one with the blue ribbon. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Arthur, what did he do? I told her. She didn't say anything for a few seconds. Then she made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh, but wasn't quite surprise either. It was the sound of a person who has spent 50 years watching families do terrible things to each other over real estate. I'll have it pulled by noon, she said. Meet me at the office at 2. The Cushman Law Office is above a hardware store on Main Street in a building that's been there since 1922. Vera has occupied the second floor for the better part of 3 decades. The stairs creak. The windows don't seal properly, and you can hear the traffic below. But the bookshelves are floor to ceiling, and she knows where every volume is without looking, and that tells you everything you need to know about a lawyer. I sat across from her desk and watched her read the document I had placed in front of her. She read slowly, the way she always did, moving her lips slightly over the important clauses. When she finished, she set it down, took off her reading glasses, and looked at me. "Arthur," she said, "your son sold a property that, as of 18 months ago, he no longer has the unencumbered right to transfer." "I know," I said. She leaned back. "Tell me what you're thinking." Here's what my son didn't understand about the farm. When Ellen was diagnosed with cancer 11 years ago, I spent a lot of nights sitting at this same kitchen table going through every piece of paper I owned. I was 62 years old. I had a sick wife, a farm worth just over $2 million, and a son who was already showing the kind of judgment that made me uneasy. I wanted to protect Ellen's legacy. I wanted to make sure that if something happened to me, the land stayed in the family and wasn't carved up or sold off to pay debts I didn't know about. So I restructured the ownership the way I would have structured a commercial property deal because that's the only language I fully trust. I created a life estate in the farmhouse and the surrounding 12 acres. My name, my right to live there until my death, recorded at the county clerk's office. Irrevocable, under Kentucky law. Unilaterally, non-transferable without my signature and notarized consent. The remaining 400 acres I placed into a family land trust with the provision that any sale required the written consent of the trustee. The trustee was not my son. The trustee was Vera Cushman. My son had a copy of the original deed from when his grandfather's estate was settled. It showed the property in my name, the whole 412 acres, clean and simple. He either didn't know about the restructuring, or he didn't bother to look, or he looked and didn't understand what he was reading. I suspected the second. Whatever ag company his wife had found, whatever Lexington buyers had wired money into whatever account, they were about to discover that they had purchased something my son didn't own. At least not cleanly. At least not without my signature, which he did not have, and Vera's consent, which she had not given. Vera pulled out a notepad. She uncapped a pen. "Okay," she said. "Walk me through what you want to happen." "I want the buyers to find out on their own," I said. "I don't want to call them. I don't want to stop the wire. I want the money to clear. I want my son to feel safe." Vera raised an eyebrow. "And then I want to show up at the farm on Friday morning with the title documents and a very clear explanation of why the sale is void." She was quiet. Then she said, "You know this puts your son in a serious position. If the funds have already moved and the company discovers a defective title, they'll come after him for fraud, potentially criminal." "I know. He's your son, Arthur." "I know that too," I said. She looked at me for a long moment. I looked back. She's known me for nearly 40 years. She knew I didn't say things I didn't mean. She nodded and picked up her pen. I drove home that evening on back roads, the way Ellen and I used to when we weren't in any hurry to get anywhere in particular. The fields were starting to green up. There's a particular shade of green that Kentucky gets in April that doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. Or at least that's what Ellen always said, and I believed her. I rolled the window down and let the air come in. My phone had 3 missed calls from my son. I didn't return any of them. He showed up at the house on Thursday morning. He didn't knock. He opened the back door and walked into the kitchen the way he had since he was 12 years old. And for a fraction of a second, I saw him at 12, muddy boots and all. Then I saw him at 46 in his pressed chinos and his Lexington real estate company windbreaker, and the image snapped back to the present. "Dad," he said, his voice carrying that same practiced control, "Melanie and I just wanted to make sure you're doing okay with all this. The company said they'd give you an extra couple of days if you need help moving things." I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee. I didn't stand up. "Sit down," I said. He sat. I pushed a copy of the life estate document across the table to him. He picked it up. I watched his eyes move across the first paragraph, then stop. Then go back to the beginning and move across it again. "What is this?" he said. His voice had changed slightly. That's the life estate I recorded at the county clerk's office in January of 2 years ago. It means the farmhouse and the 12 acres around it cannot be sold, transferred, or encumbered without my signature. I'm 73 years old and in excellent health. I have no intention of signing. He set the paper down. His jaw tightened. Dad, that's not the deed I saw. The deed I had showed the whole property in your name, clean. That deed is 12 years old, I said. Things change when you're not paying attention. He stood up. There was a red flush starting at the back of his neck, the way it always did when he was trying to figure out which direction to be angry. The company, he said, they've already paid. The money cleared yesterday. I know, I said. Then his voice shifted, got quieter, which with my son is more dangerous than loud. Dad. The ag company is going to come up Friday with a crew. They're going to start clearing the equipment. If there's a problem with the title, you need to tell me right now so we can fix it before this gets out of hand. I looked at him. I looked at the boy I had driven to every baseball practice for 6 years. The boy I had co-signed a business loan for in 2009 that he never paid back in full. The boy who had called me 3 months ago to borrow money for a business deal that he described as a sure thing, and when I asked to see the financials, he told me I was being controlling and hung up. I thought about the Thursday evening in February when I'd overheard him on the phone out by the barn talking to Melanie. He didn't know I was there. He said, once the farm is in the company's hands, the old man can go live with Aunt Deb. She's got the room. We'll cover his expenses for a year or two and then figure it out from there. Figure it out from there. I'm 73 years old. I buried my wife in the back field. My son wanted to figure it out from there. I didn't say any of that. I said, you should probably call your buyers, son. I think they're going to want to hear from you before Friday. He left without saying goodbye. He drove out fast, throwing gravel, and I watched the cloud of dust settle back down over the lane the way dust always does eventually. I called Vera. She already knew. One of the ag company's attorneys had reached out to her that morning after running a more thorough title search than the one they'd done before closing. She said the word she used when she called back was catastrophic. Not the property, she clarified. The situation. I asked her to stay available. She said she'd already canceled her afternoon. Friday came in clear and cold. I was up before 5 the way I always am. I made coffee, fed the barn cats, walked the south field one time slowly. The white oak at the edge of the field was just starting to bud. I stood under it for a minute. Ellen is buried 4 feet to the left of the largest root. It's marked with a flat river stone we carried up from the creek the summer before she died, the two of us together. Because she wanted to choose it herself. I put my hand on the bark and didn't say anything. She knew. I went back inside, put on a good shirt, and waited. They arrived at 9:15. My son first in his truck, followed by an SUV with a Lexington County plate, and then a second SUV with a woman in a gray blazer who turned out to be the lead attorney for the ag company. Her name was Morrison. She had the look of someone who had not slept the night before and was not interested in pleasantries. 3 men in work jackets climbed out of a pickup behind them. Equipment people, there to assess the fields. They didn't know yet that they wouldn't be assessing anything. My son walked up to me on the porch. He looked like he hadn't slept either. He looked like a man who had spent the night realizing how badly he had miscalculated. Dad, he said, please, just hear them out. Maybe there's something we can work out here. Vera's car pulled up at 9:20, right on time. She got out carrying her briefcase and walked up the porch steps without hurrying. She shook my hand. She nodded at my son. She had not met him before, and she looked at him the way she looks at every person she meets for the first time in a professional context, measuring. Ms. Morrison from the ag company came forward. She had a folder in her hand and a look that was trying to be composed but wasn't quite getting there. Mr. Whitmore, she said, I think we need to sit down and talk through some issues that have come to light regarding the title. We can talk here, I said. She glanced at Vera. She glanced at my son. Then she opened the folder. She laid it out efficiently. The title search had flagged 2 instruments that had not been disclosed at the time of sale. First, the life estate encumbering the farmhouse and the surrounding 12 acres, filed and recorded and very much alive. Second, and more significantly, the family land trust recorded with Vera Cushman as trustee, which required written trustee consent for any transfer of the remaining 400 acres. That consent had not been obtained because Vera had not been contacted, because my son had apparently believed he was selling a property he had the clean authority to sell. He did not have that authority. Ms. Morrison said the words carefully and without emotion. Your son represented to our company at the time of purchase that he held clear, marketable, unencumbered title to the entirety of the 412 acres. That representation was materially inaccurate. The transaction cannot be completed as structured. We are demanding a full refund of the purchase price. My son said, I didn't know. His voice was very quiet. Ms. Morrison looked at him, not unkindly, just directly. Mr. Whitmore, in Kentucky real estate law, a seller is responsible for ensuring clear title regardless of their personal knowledge of encumbrances. What you knew or didn't know doesn't affect the legal status of the instruments on record. It affects your exposure. He turned to me. The look on his face was something I had never seen there before. Not anger, not the flush at the back of the neck. Something underneath that. He said, You could have told me, Dad. You could have just told me and we wouldn't be here. I looked at my son. I kept my voice even. I could have, I said. The same way you could have called me before you signed my land over to a corporation. The same way you could have asked me about the title before you took their money. The same way you could have told me what you were planning instead of calling me on a Tuesday and informing me I had until Friday to get out of my home. We both could have done a lot of things differently. He looked away. Ms. Morrison's phone rang. She stepped off the porch to take the call. I could hear fragments. She was talking to someone at the title insurance company. The words I caught were actionable, discrepancy, and recourse. Vera spoke quietly. The company has the right to sue for the return of funds plus damages. If they pursue the fraud angle, and based on what Ms. Morrison just said I'd expect them to, your son is looking at civil liability minimum. Criminal exposure is possible depending on what representations were made in writing and whether they can demonstrate intent. My son was standing very still. He looked at the south field. He had grown up running through that field. He had broken a collarbone falling out of the walnut tree near the fence line when he was 9. He knew this land. He turned back to me. His voice came out different, smaller. He said, Dad, I need help. Melanie pushed for this, and I let it happen because we are in a bad spot financially. We have been for 2 years. I didn't want to tell you because you would have been disappointed, and I couldn't stand that. I made a bad decision. I know I made a bad decision. Please don't let this go where it's going. I had been ready for the anger. I had been ready for the denial. I was less ready for the truth. I looked at him for a long time. Ellen used to say that the hardest thing about love is that it doesn't stop just because someone hurts you. She was right about most things. I turned to Vera. I said, what do we need to do to make the buyers whole without destroying my son in the process? Vera looked at me steadily. She knew what I was asking. The cleanest path, she said, would be a mutual rescission of the purchase agreement. The company gets their money back in full. The instruments on record remain as they are. No transfer occurs. Your son repays the purchase price, which means he'll need to come to terms with the company about a repayment arrangement given that funds have already moved. Ms. Morrison had come back to the porch. She caught the last part of what Vera said. If the funds are returned in full within 90 days, she said carefully, our company would consider not pursuing additional claims. That is not a commitment. That is a conversation we'd need to have with our board. But it's a possible path. My son looked at me. I hadn't seen that look since he was about 8 years old and had broken the window in the garage and come to tell me about it. He hated coming to tell me. He did it anyway. I told Miss Morrison that I appreciated her willingness to have that conversation. I told her the property was not for sale and never had been, and that I intended to remain on it for as long as I was able. She nodded and made a note. After they left, it was just my son and me on the porch. The equipment crew had driven away without unloading anything. The lane was quiet again. He sat on the porch step. He is 46 years old, and he sat like a teenager, elbows on his knees, looking out at the field. "I should have come to you," he said. "When things got bad, I should have come to you instead of trying to fix it this way." "Yes," I said, "you should have. I don't know how to pay them back without losing everything else." "You should have thought about that before Tuesday's phone call," I said. He nodded. He knew that. I sat in the other chair. We were quiet for a while. The mockingbird was back in the hackberry tree. "I'm not going to let them destroy you," I said eventually. "But I am not going to fix this for you either. You're going to talk to a financial attorney. A real one, not a real estate company referral. You're going to be honest about what you have and what you owe. You're going to set up a repayment arrangement with the company, and you're going to honor it. And you and Melanie are going to sit across from me at this table, and you are going to explain how this happened. All of it. No version of the story where I'm the problem. The real version." He said, "And then what?" "And then we figure out what's left of this family," I said. He didn't have an answer for that. Neither did I, exactly. But the alternative was worse, and I was old enough to know that some bridges you don't burn no matter how much smoke is already in the air. He left around noon. He hugged me on the porch, which he hadn't done in probably 3 years. It was an awkward hug, the kind where neither person is sure the other one wants it. I let it happen. I walked back inside and poured what was left of the morning coffee, even though it was cold, and I sat at the kitchen table where my wife used to do her crossword puzzles and my father used to pay the farm bills, and his father, before him, probably sat through seasons I can barely imagine now. The papers were still on the table. The life estate document, the trust instrument, the chain of title going back to my grandfather's original purchase in 1951. I stacked them neatly and put them in the folder. People ask me sometimes why I went to the trouble of structuring the property the way I did. Why not just leave it in a simple will? Why not just trust the family to do the right thing? I always say the same thing. A will is a wish. A recorded instrument is a fact. I spent 35 years learning the difference between what people intend and what actually holds up. You don't protect what matters by hoping. You protect it by being meticulous. Ellen used to say I trusted paperwork more than people. I told her that wasn't true. I told her I trusted people, and then I protected them from themselves with paperwork. She laughed at that. She said, "Arthur Whitmore, you are the most unromantic romantic I have ever known." I kept the farm. My son is in the process of working out a repayment arrangement with the company, which will take him years and will cost him more than the decision was ever worth. Melanie didn't come to the table meeting. She sent her own attorney and then moved to her sister's house in Bowling Green, and I suspect that situation is heading somewhere my son doesn't fully see yet. He comes out on Saturdays now. He doesn't talk much. He fixes things that need fixing. The fence line, the gate hinge, the section of porch railing that's been soft for 2 years. He drinks coffee and looks at the fields. I don't know what we're building back or whether we are building anything at all. Some damage doesn't repair. It just weathers. You learn to live around it. But the land is here. The white oak is here. Ellen is here. And I am still home. There's a moment I keep coming back to. Not the morning they showed up with the SUVs and the equipment crew. Not the look on my son's face when he read the life estate document for the first time. The moment I keep returning to is quieter than all of that. It's the night before, standing under the white oak in the south field in the dark, my hand on the bark, thinking about Ellen, thinking about the fact that what was about to happen the next morning was, in a way, the direct result of every choice I had made and every choice my son had made, stretching back years. Actions accumulate. That's the honest truth of it. They pile up silently, the way snow does, and then one morning you walk outside and the weight of it has changed the shape of everything. I spent a long time after all this asking myself what I could have done differently. I don't think the legal structure was the mistake. Protecting the farm was the right call, and I'd make it again. But I wonder sometimes whether I was too self-contained with my son, whether I mistook silence for strength in too many conversations over too many years. He didn't come to me when things went bad financially because he was afraid of my disappointment. A father has to sit with that. It doesn't excuse what he did, but it's a thread I have to hold. What I know for certain is this. My son made his decision without gathering the facts, without asking the hard questions, without doing the work that the situation required. He assumed he understood the whole picture because he had one old document and a motivated buyer and a wife pushing him toward a solution that felt fast. That's not intelligence, that's the opposite of it. Real thinking is slow and uncomfortable, and it requires you to ask what you don't know, not just what you do. I spent my career as an engineer understanding that the thing that collapses a structure is almost never the thing you were watching. It's the thing you didn't think to check. And then there is the question of what he owed me, not legally, morally. He owed me a conversation. He owed me honesty about the financial trouble they were in. He owed me the chance to be his father instead of an obstacle. The willingness to do that, to go to someone and say, I made a mess and I need help, takes more courage than most people give it credit for. It's easier to maneuver around a problem than to walk straight into the room where you have to admit it out loud. My son chose the easier path and it nearly destroyed him. What saved him, if anything has, wasn't me. It was that he finally stopped maneuvering. He stood on that porch and told me the truth. Late, under pressure, with no good options left. But he told me. That matters. I've watched people never get there. I've watched men go to their graves still working an angle. The fact that my son could stop and say I was wrong and I need help, that's the thing I hold on to. I kept the farm. I kept the white oak. I kept what Ellen and I built together. But I want to be honest about the cost. A victory that leaves your son making Saturday trips to fix fence posts in silence is not the clean thing it sounds like from the outside. We are building something back, or we are not. I don't know yet. What I know is that I will not carry bitterness into that uncertainty. Bitterness is a weight that only punishes the one holding it. The farm will be here long after I'm gone. I intend to make sure it goes to someone who knows what it cost.